It's time for the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm, of course, your host, Brian Beatty. Thanks for joining me this morning. Gosh, 15 or so years I've been on this program, helping you guys better understand the real estate market, the trends within it, what's happening, what I see as somebody that's been selling real estate for 20 years here locally. I've sold about 1,500 homes, about $1 billion worth of real estate sold. And through my real estate team, we provide you guys with an understanding of what we're experiencing behind the scenes so that you can get a jump on the actual trends in the market. We tend to see them before the data or the news articles come out with regard to what's happening in the real estate market. And today, like I mentioned last week, I brought in a lender to really help us understand what might happen, whether 50-year mortgages are going to be a thing or not. Are they a good idea or not? What's going to happen to the market as a result of that? I want to talk about portable mortgages. I want to talk about the word on the street where in some instances there is no longer a minimum credit score. And so to do that, a familiar voice, and for those of you that watch us online, because we video everything while we're in the studio and put it on YouTube, those of you who have seen the videos, a familiar face as well, Derek Goulette with Fairway Mortgage. Good morning.
Hey, Brian. How are you today?
Fantastic.
It's always fun to be here.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great. You and I have such great conversations on air about the market and what we're seeing. And, we're both blessed to have very vibrant businesses. And so we get a lot of interactions with folks. We have a really, I think, solid understanding of what the market is thinking and feeling and how they're behaving or not behaving as a result.
Correct. Yes.
So I think before I get into everything that's going on and all the suggestions that are being made out there with regard to things like a 50-year mortgage or a portable mortgage, I always like to first just kind of get your read on things because your involvement with people, especially as it relates to their finances, which is what ties in a lot of the emotional aspect of all this, we don't get to see that side of it as much as real estate agents. So I'd just be curious to know how you feel about the market and kind of what you're seeing and experiencing right now.
So in general, I think that given how many houses are on the market, it's giving buyers a much more a bigger opportunity to pause and find the right thing at the right price, and also allowing them to actually get deals that we haven't seen in a while. Whether it's beating somebody up on price or beating somebody up for massive amounts of closing costs, which can really drive payments downward. I think that we're seeing things right now today that we haven't even seen, when there was more inventory, say 6 months ago than there was a year ago. I think it's continuing to compound.
Right. One thing that I see is, everybody's looking for direction right now. Which direction is the market headed? Is it still going up? Is it flat? Is it going down? And really, when people say what direction is the market headed, what they really mean is where are prices headed?
Yes.
And what's happening behind the scenes as we're trying to figure out the market's trajectory, because even if you look at all the national publications and the major economists and, go and do a study and look at the projections that companies like Zillow and realtor.com and, fill in the blank company has offered in terms of their opinion on where prices will be 12 months from now.
Yep.
It's all over the place.
Correct.
There is no real consistency to the projections that are being made, and they're changing fairly dramatically over time. I mean, Zillow went from 3% growth in 2026 at the beginning of this year down to like -2%. Now they're up to 4%. I mean, it's really tough. So I think really what that means is that a lot of people don't really know which direction we're going or where we're ultimately going to land, say this time next year.
Correct. I think that the direction for housing, whether it's up, down, or flat, really depends on, and I hate to say it this way, but it's somewhat predicated on the mortgage market. Because if people can afford more, then prices will more than likely rise. If rates don't move downward like we've been thinking they are, and now they have moved down somewhat, but if they don't continue to move downward, then you probably stay stagnant. If they go up, then you probably lose a little. And I think that there's so much unknown with conflicting jobs reports and conflicting inflation that like it's hard for the market to determine which direction it's really going.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so bringing that back to today's consumer, right? The person that is more than likely sitting on a pretty substantial amount of equity that has the ability to sell and receive a really nice paycheck from that closing. And then we look at something like interest rates that are at 6.5% right now, which in the grand scheme of things, and guys know, look, I know that it's higher than 3%.
Yes.
Right? It's double what it was at one point in time. But let's just be real. 6.5% is not an outlandish interest rate by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
The challenge is it's coupled with really high prices.
Correct.
While all of this is going on and while people are trying to figure out which direction the market can go because they're all trying to quote unquote time the market, inventory is slowly rising.
Yep.
And so obviously with more supply comes less demand and lower prices. Now, in the majority of the Charleston market, we are still in what we call a seller's market, meaning we are absorbing inventory at a rate that still favors sellers and still favors, at least a little bit, price appreciation. So when we introduce something like a 50-year mortgage as a clear response to the affordability crisis we have in our country right now, what's your take on that?
So I think it's kind of like any other mortgage product that's ever been introduced. It's a tool, and I'm not sure that it's the right tool for the right job yet. I think if you look at, so the way loans get paid down is through what's called an amortization schedule. So each month, your principal and interest changes a little bit. And if you look at how long that gets stretched out on a 50-year mortgage, that first 10, 15 years, I mean, you're paying almost nothing except pure interest. And so if you ever want to sell that house and move on because it's not the right house, then I think you're stuck in a position where if you're not in an appreciating market, then, more or less you're renting from yourself. Now, if you get some appreciation, I think it could be a good tool. But you got to counterbalance that with how much do you actually save on a monthly basis? Mm-hmm. And, the math on something like a $400,000 loan, which is kind of about average in the Charleston Tri-County area right now, it's like $300 a month.
Right.
Like that doesn't necessarily swing the needle enough for the average consumer to warrant the almost double what you pay in interest cost over between a 30 and a 50.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the math on it, on a $400,000 house, the additional amount you pay in interest over the life of the loan, assuming you actually pay off your mortgage in 50 years, right?
Yes.
Which we all know that the overwhelming majority of people won't. But it's an additional like $400,000 in interest that you're paying over the life of that loan with the additional 20 years tacked on to the life of the loan.
Correct. Yeah.
I've heard that, it might make sense for somebody if, let's say, they could already qualify for a mortgage on a 30-year amortization schedule, and with those savings, invest them into something else that provides you with a return or fund some other type of account or so on and so forth. I have my own opinion on that, but what's your take on that?
I mean, again, if it's used as a tool where, not in like a Gestapo way, but you're almost forced to invest the delta, then it could be a magnificent tool. But again, I don't know that most people are disciplined enough to go about it that way.
I agree. That's the challenge. And so I think what happens is, from my perspective, if 50-year mortgages do become a thing, you create an opportunity for somebody to get into home ownership, yes. However, if the market does not appreciate, or if you do not buy a home that, say, has the ability for you to add value over time, right? I mean, it could, I guess, theoretically work for somebody that's going to build sweat equity
Correct.
In their home. But if you just own the asset on a 50-year mortgage basis, and then you go to sell that home in 5, 7, even 10 years, you haven't really touched the principal balance enough to create equity through ownership, which means that you are essentially fighting to get back your down payment.
Correct. Now, let's just say you compounded you're averaging 2%, which is pretty low historical average for our market, you're going to gain, but it compounds. So you are going to gain a little bit, but it's not nearly as much as if you stayed in a house for 10 years and you had a 30-year mortgage.
Right.
You're going to pay roughly 25% of your loan off in the first 10 years on a 30-year mortgage, somewhere around that math, whereas you might only pay 8% on a 50-year mortgage. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have more equity to transition, again, unless you've got an investment vehicle that you're investing that $300 a month into to make up the difference.
And that investment into that other vehicle, whatever it might be, has to exceed the cost of the interest on the mortgage in order for that to be a viable investment.
Correct.
Which really means you need to be investing at something that produces a yield of like 10% per year, because you'd have to pay taxes on that.
Correct. Yep.
So in the grand scheme of things, I think it could help a select group of people.
Yep.
But I don't think it's in any way, shape, or form the silver bullet that our market needs. And on top of that, it's a demand side solution, right?
Yep. Correct.
A big challenge we have in this market right now is the lock-in effect, right? All the folks that have 3% mortgages that don't want to trade it in for a 6.5% mortgage because they don't really have to move.
Yep.
They'd like to.
You're in that boat. I'm in that boat, probably.
Yeah.
Which kind of begs the next question of the portable mortgage, which you talked about.
Right. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to get into that. We're chatting with Derek Goulette of Fairway Independent Mortgage, a familiar face and voice on the show. Derek, what's your contact info if somebody wants to get in touch with you about this?
It's 949-280-8044.
Right on. And you guys always know you can call or text me. The number here, which comes straight to me, by the way, is 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065. Or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. We can always connect you with Derek if you didn't jot that number down. And don't forget to check out our videos on YouTube and our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all that great stuff. We're in the studio with Derek Goulette of Fairway Independent Mortgage, talking about really just the state of the mortgage market and some of the ideas, we'll call them that have come out of the White House and other sources with regard to things like a 50-year mortgage or a portable mortgage, right? And so that's what I want to talk about next. But just really quickly, Derek, for folks that might not have been quick to the draw enough to jot down your contact info last time, what's a great number for them to reach you if they have questions, they want to refinance or discuss getting a home loan?
Perfect. It's area code 949-280-8044. That's my cell phone. Just reach out on it.
Awesome. And of course, you guys know that you can always call me directly through this show. My number 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or you can go to our website, listingsincharleston.com. And of course, don't forget to check us out on YouTube. We've got all our great clips on there where we video the show. And you can also listen to it in podcast form if you're just out and about and want to listen to the show on the radio. Or on podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all that good stuff. So, all right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about this idea that on surface level is really exciting. The idea of a portable mortgage, right? Help us break that down.
Yep.
And talk some sense into those that have maybe suggested that.
Perfect. Well, I mean, we used this word earlier and I'm going to use it again. It would be an amazing tool, but it's just that it's a tool, it's like a skill saw. Like if you need to cut a piece of wood, it's a great tool. So what it is essentially you are able to take your mortgage from your current house and just move that over into a new house. Obviously, you have to cover the difference between what you sell your house for and you buy the new house for. So whether that's cash or an equity line, you got to cover that difference. Take for example, let's just say you live in a $650,000 house that you owe $300,000 on, and you've had the loan for 5 years. You got a 3% rate. That's amazing. You got $350,000 in equity there, and the house you really want to buy is $800,000. So you either have to bring the $150,000 in cash, or get some sort of secondary financing for that $150,000. Now, you like your house, but you love the new house, so you would clearly sign up for that if that was an option. Now, I'm going to say that I'm going to kind of burst the bubble a little bit. the system in the United States for how we package and sell and trade loans is not designed for it. There's other countries where they don't necessarily do what's called a securitization pool. So a securitization pool, for those who don't know, just in simple layman's terms, is they put a whole bunch of mortgages together and then they go and they sell payment streams to investors who need payments. Kind of like a bond. So you go buy a bond from the government and they're just going to pay you money every single month. Same thing for a mortgage. That's all a securitization pool is. Whereas in other countries, they don't necessarily securitize loans in the same way. So they're not selling a pool of 100 loans to 50 investors who want an income stream. They're literally just putting it on their books, and Brian's writing a check every month to XYZ Bank. XYZ Bank takes the principal and interest and keeps the interest and puts the principal against your loan. Brian could go to XYZ Bank and say, hey, selling this house and I'm buying this house, just swap it for me. Whereas here, you'd have to get 50 investors or 100 or 300 different investors to be like, hey, I'm going to sign off on this little switcheroo.
Right.
So in theory, it'd be really cool. But in practicality, I don't think it'll work.
I tend to agree. We'd have to redesign the entire system.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd have to convince all the people that actually own the paper on the mortgage to agree to extend what in most instances is a pretty low yield for those investors, right? No one's getting rich off a 3% mortgage.
No. When long-term borrowing costs were a quarter and you made 3, yeah, you felt like you hit a home run. Now, when inflation's 4 and you're only making 3, you're technically losing money. So why would you want to do that?
Right. So love the idea of a portable mortgage. And even if they were to introduce that now and say, hey, starting now, if you got a mortgage, we'll allow that mortgage to be portable, it doesn't really do anything for anybody, right? Because who, I guess in theory, wants to take their 6.5% mortgage to another property 5 years from now? I mean, of course, the hope would be that rates are lower than they are today.
Well, the only reason you'd want to take it is if you think that inflation will be higher down the road,
or rates will be higher.
Will be higher, then you would gladly sign up for a 6.5 today. I mean, there's been periods over the last 24 months where rates have touched 8%. So like you would sign up for a 6.5 in that scenario, and you'd gladly take that old mortgage to the new place.
Do you think there's any threat, just as a side note, of us having increasing mortgage rates right now? Is that anything that's being talked about kind of behind closed doors and your end?
No, I think that the general consensus is that there's still more downward pressure than upward pressure on rates, which is, I tend to agree with that. I know jobs numbers came out this week from September, little lagging there, and they were maybe a little stronger than anticipated. But, if you talk to people, I don't know that the numbers that are being published necessarily line up with what's being felt in the general marketplace.
I tend to agree with that too. Yeah. So if portable mortgages really aren't a thing, or probably won't be a thing, if 50-year mortgages, I mean, they might be a thing, but probably not would be my guess.
Yep.
Then where do we go from there? What are some creative solutions that exist that allow somebody to kind of manipulate the current market, so to speak?
I think that kind of what we're seeing is, again, you and I alluded to it, or actually talked about it earlier, is massive seller concessions, using those to get really creative with interest rate buydowns, both temporary and permanent. That's item 1. Item 2 is some down payment assistance programs. And then item 3 is, people that are pushing their affordability spectrum who don't necessarily qualify for or don't want the higher rates that come along with down payment assistance. We're looking at things like FHA solar. So you can build a solar system into the cost of the home. And then that also actually provides them a down payment and or closing costs and or money post-closing. So they have a little bit of a nest egg to walk into the house to.
So if somebody wants to put solar panels on their roof, there is real incentive provided by lenders to do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're paying them, essentially their down payment, 3.5%, in the form of a actual credit. Again, that works. You can use that to buy a new roof. You can use that. I'm actually doing a refinance for somebody right now. We built the cost into that, and she's walking away with $10,000.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm not changing her rate. Her payment's going up by $180 a month, but she's getting rid of her $240 power bill, and she owns the solar. She's not leasing it. So then, when she goes to sell in a couple of years, she doesn't have to deal with a lease transfer.
That is always such a nightmare to deal with on a real estate transaction, is leased solar panels.
Oh, the bane of our existence.
There's nothing fun about that side of the process.
Yeah, so there's a lot of creative solutions, especially with as much inventory as we have.
Yeah. We have a statistician that provides us with market stats for our company. Specifically, we sought them out because we wanted access to some data points that just aren't provided by our MLS or our realtor board. And some of the things we track are like how often closings are combined with closing costs or some sort of concession provided by the seller to the buyer.
Yep.
And this also just, quick side note, these are the things that people can't see when they're online trying to do their own research on what their house is worth.
Correct.
Right? Something might have sold for $850, but the seller provided the buyer with $25,000 in concessions, so it's really more like $825.
Yep.
Which can just skew people's perception of what their home is worth, which is why it's important, I think, to get a real estate agent to really do the math for you, because we just have access to data. They don't. But interestingly, just on that data point really quickly, over half of the transactions that are occurring right now include seller paid closing costs or concessions of some sort, and the average amount of those concessions is like $8,500. So, and I'm sure you're probably seeing that on your end too with the mortgages that you close. There's a vast majority of sellers are having to pitch in or kind of, sweeten the deal to get them to choose their house over someone else's by offering things like closing costs or an interest rate buy down, which is my preferred method.
Yeah, I would say roughly 80% of my transactions right now have some, whether it's, $3,000 or as much as $30,000 in seller concessions. And kind of the way I look at it is the average person is borrowing between 80 and 95% of their purchase price, whereas closing costs are always dollar for dollar. So if you can, instead of taking a price reduction, if you can get that, you're literally saving real dollars in your own pocket.
Absolutely. And I think the interest rate buy down is still one of the things that sellers can do to try and take control of the process. Because let's be honest, there are a lot of sellers out there that are on the market right now. We have some of the listings too. I mean, we're not bulletproof. I'm not Superman. Sometimes homes sit on the market for longer than we anticipate. And the challenge is buyers are getting more deals now. They are finally starting to kind of beat up the seller a little bit over their price, or they're starting to get those closing costs or concessions that a few years ago they just had no chance of getting. And so, and they also have the ability to wait.
Yep.
For a lot of folks. One thing that I would mention right now, though, is a lot of what's on the market right now are, and I kind of hate to use this term because it sounds negative or derogatory, but it's like the leftovers, right? Yep. A lot of the people that tried selling in the spring, summer, early fall that just haven't sold yet. And it might not even be that their home is priced incorrectly. It could just be that they're in one of those little pockets in our market right now that's just not moving very fast.
Yep.
And that's where communication with your agent comes into play on the seller side, and having a very specific, targeted, customized, tried and true plan to generate interest for that house comes into play. That's, I think, what's missing from a lot of sellers' equations right now is an agent that actually has the ability and the know-how and the budget to purposefully market that house to potential buyers for that house, rather than just, stick it on the MLS and have it get syndicated to Zillow and realtor.com and just wait for people to stumble across it.
Yep.
One last question I had for you, which I feel like we don't really ever hear about it or talk about it, but ARMs. Let's talk about that for just a minute. When does it make sense for somebody to get an adjustable rate mortgage? Is that something that you are a proponent of right now, or what's the situation in which somebody would consider that?
So I think that when there's a bigger disparity, meaning a spread between the 2-year notes and the 10-year notes, is when ARMs start to make sense. Right now, the spread is not huge. And so generally speaking, you can look at a 10-year Treasury note and kind of get a direction of what rates are doing. They're not perfect, but it gives you an idea. And if you look at the difference between a 2-year and a 10-year, that should tell you about the spread between an ARM adjustable. Now, they're still fixed in for a certain period of time and a true fixed rate loan. That difference today is I'll say negligible in exchange for the risk that comes with the shorter time frame. Because if rates rise, would you trade a 1/4 or 0.5% in rate for 7 years if you knew that 7 years from today the rate could be 5% higher? Probably not.
Right.
If that was a 2% disparity, like it normally is, then all day long you would do it, because you can bank the savings or you can pay your loan down enough that like it doesn't hurt. And especially with temporary and permanent buy down solutions that are out there, when you average out a 2-1 buy down over the first 7 years, an ARM cannot touch it. Your blended average, meaning if you add all the rates together, is significantly lower than you could get in an ARM product today. So perfect. I think they have a place, but I think that their place comes in when long-term rates are a little higher and short-term rates are a little lower.
Gotcha. Thanks for explaining that. Derek, as always, a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you very much for being here. One more time, Derek Goulette with Fairway Independent Mortgage. What is your contact information if someone wants to reach out to you?
It's 949-280-8044.
Awesome. And of course, guys, you know that if you didn't jot that down, but you've kind of committed to memory, my phone number, which I hope you have, 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or listingsincharleston.com. And you can always send me an email too, if that's just your preferred way of doing things. Brian with an I, at brianbeattyteam.com. I always like to take a moment and just tell you guys that I appreciate those of you that listen to this program. I know that things in the real estate market are a little tough to understand at the moment, and that's why you come to shows like this, so that you can hear what's really happening in the market, what's happening behind the scenes, where are the real trends in this market right now, so that if you're thinking of buying, selling, investing in real estate, or you'd like to have us manage one of your rental properties as an example, the bottom line is you're an informed consumer. You understand the market. You understand what's happening. You understand the process. There really aren't many shows that talk about the process of buying or selling or investing in real estate. Plenty on investing, but not so much on just the everyday consumer that needs to sell a home and buy another, buy their first home, sell their first home, so on and so forth. So anyways, thank you for listening to the program. If at any point in time you want to reach out to me and talk about working together, I have sold real estate here in Charleston for 20 years, been in the top 1% of agents for 15 years, going on 16 years now, sold about 1,500 homes. So if you're looking for a quality real estate agent that still practices real estate, I would love the opportunity to earn your business. My number, if you want to reach out to me, call or text, is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065, or listingsincharleston.com. So speaking of trends in the market and some things that are changing, one thing that has been brought back that has been incredibly helpful for people is home sale contingencies. Now, if we think about this several years ago, when the market was really hot, it was almost impossible for a seller to agree to give you enough time to list and sell your home to be able to afford to buy theirs. The general school of thought, of course, was, why wait when I have plenty of other people that are ready, willing, and able to buy my house right now without having to take on the risk of waiting for you to list your home and hope it's listed at the right price, and hope that your home is in good enough condition to not scare away buyers, and that you're working with a competent real estate agent that knows how to actually sell real estate, and that you get the price that you need to be able to afford my home, and that it takes a short amount of time, right? There were a lot of what ifs, and people didn't want to get caught in the game of dominoes, where in order for them to be able to buy a home they want, you have to sell your home first to be able to buy theirs. But maybe when their home's under contract, they take a home sale contingency offer from another buyer, and it just creates this domino effect where if at any point in time one of those dominoes doesn't fall, you, the person trying to buy a home that needs to sell yours first, can't do it because something happened along the way. And so now that the market has changed, now that properties are sitting on the market for longer, 50 to 70 days in some areas of our market, sellers are now more open-minded to a home sale contingency. So this has helped a lot of people. And this is something that we do a lot of, right, on our team. We typically work with folks, and of course we work with anybody that we feel we can really help. But the majority of people that we work with are selling a nice kind of big home and downsizing into something more manageable, or they're getting ready to sell a home and buy something a little bit more on the pricey side. But of course, we work with everybody. We sell land all over the state. But that's generally the folks that we're working with. And so a lot of them are not in a position where they can just go and buy a second house with cash on hand and with the income that they have, and then just worry about selling their first house, which has a mortgage and payments and debt, whenever they feel like it. There are obviously some that have the ability to do that. But for the most part, people need to sell their home and get equity from their home in order to buy another one. Well, again, now that we have more inventory on the market, now that that inventory is taking longer to sell, and the trajectory of the market is slanting more toward a normal, balanced market, we're not at a buyer's market yet, really, in any segment of our market. There might be a few pockets here and there, but for the most part, we're still in a seller's market, but we're trending toward a normal market, right? Normal market meaning prices are going to increase probably in line with inflation. So when you're going to, so what most people do, let me back up a little bit. What most people do that really have an interest in moving from point A to point B, and they own the home at point A, is they just go into the market and they wait to find the house that they really like, and then they get their ducks in a row. Then they call an agent or they try to sell it themselves if that's what they want to do. But they find the house they want to buy first, and then they engage with the real estate agent to go through the entire process of trying to sell their home and sell it quickly to be able to buy the home that they ultimately want to buy. My suggestion would, if you're in that boat, if that's something you're considering making a move toward the end of this year, next year, doesn't matter when, the process or I think the steps that you take can be what makes you money or loses you money. And this is all spelled out in a guide that I wrote called The Most Comprehensive Home Seller Guide in Charleston. It's 35 pages. It's all written by me personally. It is not a ChatGPT document. It is my opinion, my experiences, my success as a real estate agent on paper to help people that are thinking about selling their home position themselves for financial success, emotional success. You know, it's not easy selling a house in any market. There's always going to be stress, but we can severely lessen it through education, right? Through communication. And so for the folks that are thinking of buying a home next year that need to sell their home first, I want to talk about a few options that exist. First and foremost, there's of course the traditional way of doing it, where you make an offer on a home and that purchase is contingent upon you listing, marketing, and selling your home to be able to buy theirs, right? So this would be for the person that hasn't taken any steps whatsoever to prepare their home for sale or list their property for sale. They just go into the market, they see a house they really want to like, they want to buy it, and in order to afford it, they have to sell their house first, right? That scenario has the lowest probability chance of getting accepted by a seller. Usually sellers want to see that you've taken some steps toward preparing your home for sale, and that as soon as that offer is accepted, you will immediately list and sell your property, and you're prepared to do so. So one thing that can really help you as a seller, because you're going to need to sell your home in order to buy another, is to have someone like me walk through your house and say, all right, if we were to put the property on the market, these are the things that I would suggest doing. These are the things that I think your home might need from a staging or decluttering perspective. We can go ahead and start working on that now. These are some of the repairs that I think might need to be made. And it would be much better for us to make those repairs preemptively rather than wait for the buyer to do a home inspection, because home inspectors do a great job of not just identifying the issue, but sometimes blowing those issues out of proportion. And then you get the buyer's contractor to walk through, or they get one of these companies, and there are a few of them in town. And with all due respect, I mean, I use these companies, but very sparingly because they're expensive. So you have these companies that essentially focus on punch list related items for your house, where you send in a copy of the inspection report, and then they just, within 24 hours, they use their price estimator and they spit out line item numbers on, hey, here's how much all this stuff is going to cost to fix. They're always more expensive than just working with a contractor that I know and that I like and that I trust, because I also, I flip homes. And so I have contractors that do work for us. And, like a classic example, I just renovated a 2,200 square foot house in West Ashley, full renovation, literally everything. We got it done in 5 weeks. So, if you want context like that, let me know. But that's kind of the point, is you want to be able to control the cost as best you can. If you're waiting for the buyer's inspector and the buyer's contractor to quote those repairs, they will not do you as the homeowner any favors, right? You want to control that cost. It always kills me when folks invite me over to their house and they've done a bunch of work to their house. Before I got there, I learned how much they spent on those repairs, and it hurts. It hurts me personally, because I know that had they just called me beforehand, I could have saved them thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for the same work, probably done in less time. So for the folks that want to go the traditional method of, I want to just find the house I want to buy, and then I'll go forward with the process of listing and selling my house, you can do it that way. But I think there are some ways that you can gain a competitive edge. And so those are some of the things I want to talk about when we come back, or what are some creative solutions that exist for folks that need to sell their home in order to buy another, rather than just doing the traditional, hey, I want to buy your house, but I need to list and sell my home first, right? How can we have a better look to that scenario? So stick around. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show right here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. And if you want to reach out to me, if you're thinking of selling your home and buying another, we'll go through some of these things in just a moment. But if you just don't have time for that, just reach out to me and we'll have a personal chat. My number, which comes straight to me, is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or you can always go to our website, listingsincharleston.com. So I told you guys I would leave you with some creative strategies and solutions for those of you that want to buy another home but have to sell your home first. You need the money from your current home in order to afford to buy the home you really want to buy. And we talked about the traditional, hey, I want to buy your house, but I need to list and sell my home first. Here are a few other strategies that we've used in the past very successfully that aren't used very often by folks in this market. And I always find it interesting that this is not a more common solution, but the first one is a home purchase contingency, right? So we know that it's taking a little longer these days to sell your house. So we need every day we can get in marketing days before we ultimately find the buyer for your house, unless we price your home so aggressively that we're one of those homes that sells for full price in a week, which, by the way, represents literally half of the properties that sell that didn't need to take a price reduction, right? For every 100 homes that list in our market, 27 of them fail to sell, right? They do not sell with the first agent they hire, or they don't sell at all and they're taken off the market and they do not reappear. Of the ones that sell, right, the 73 that do sell, half of them have to reduce their price because they're overpriced. And then half of them are selling at full price or more in 7 days or less. So there's a huge difference in our market with regard to positioning and pricing. But if you don't have the luxury of waiting to get the best price, then one thing you can do is something called a home purchase contingency, wherein you list your house for sale before you find the home you want to buy. You can even accept an offer from a buyer before you find the home you want to buy. But the home purchase contingency states that you have some negotiated period of time to identify a property, put it under contract, get through your inspections and appraisal, make sure that you actually have the ability to buy the house. And then once that occurs, you then remove the home purchase contingency from the deal you're doing with the person that wants to buy your house. So instead of going and buying a house contingent upon you selling your house first, you sell your house contingent upon finding a house that's a suitable replacement property, right? It gets you on the market. It allows you to get in the fast lane, right? Rather than having to wait, because most sellers, even in this market, are probably not going to give you more than 30 days, maybe 6 weeks to get your home under contract before they remove that home sale contingency. So it's important that you position yourself. And one thing that we can do before you even put your home on the market as a second and very widely used strategy among our clients right now is something called a pocket listing, where you agree to hire us, but we're not allowed to do any form of public marketing, right? We don't put a sign in the ground. We don't put it online. We only communicate with people in our database and other agents in our brokerage and their respective databases to see if we can find a buyer for your house before it finds its way online. The beauty in doing that is that because it's not listed online, there is no days on market that starts to accrue, right? There's no data point for somebody to say, well, your home's been on the market for 90 days. Why should I pay you that price? If it's a pocket listing, there is no online record of the house. We're just giving buyers in our database the opportunity to buy something off market, but there is no days on market. So theoretically, you could do this for months and months and months and no one would be the wiser. It's something we're doing a lot for folks. It's a fairly non-invasive way to sell a house. And if you're thinking of selling your home and buying another, it could be a fantastic solution for you. If you want more information on that or anything else we've talked about, you can text the word guide to 843-800-0065. Text the word guide to 843-800-0065, and we'll send you the most comprehensive home seller guide in Charleston. Or reach out to me. We'll have a chat. We'll talk about your situation, see if we can help, or you can check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. You guys enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.